Hello everyone, Squee here. Welcome to another edition of Thoughts Behind the Wheel. I apologize for being so loud. I listened to this, my first one yesterday, and wow, my car makes a lot of noise. Really, what I think it is a different microphone, because it's the same car that I used to drive when I did Thoughts Behind the Wheel last time. But it is a different microphone, so maybe that's what it is. Maybe I should look into buying a high quality headset mic thing, if they even make those. Whatever the case, wow, I'm happy you guys enjoyed Thoughts Behind the Wheel so much. A lot of you came out and said, you know, hey, we really missed this, so glad it's back, and it's nice. It's only been one day, and there's already a lot of you asking questions, way more questions than I could answer. First and foremost, I get this more than any other question: when's futur coming back? I love that you guys love it so much, and Kriana and I do intend on finishing both Rosalind and Robbie's and Perrin and Mouse's story. The problem is that we're just both so busy. It's so hard to find time when we're both free for a few hours to record futur. And the thing is, it can't just be, oh, we're free for a few hours here this week, and maybe we're free for a few hours there next week. It has to be a time each week consistently that we are both free and not exhausted, because this is a subscription-based game. Anyways, we can't stand playing the free-to-play version, only because we don't want to level up. But anyway, the point is, it's really hard for both of us to get our schedules synced that much. It's amazing that we can have it synced enough to do riffs every week. So the truthful answer is, I don't know when it's going to start again. We both love it, and we both want to finish it. It's just a matter of time. So when that changes, I promise you guys will be the first ones to know. No, you won't. We'll be the first ones to know, but you will learn shortly after. So beyond that question, a lot of you seem to really enjoy my history stuff when I used to talk about history thingamajbobber stuff things. And there was a question in there that I thought was actually rather interesting and plays rather well into this. That question was, if we had the world we have today, as in the real world, but we had the races from Dungeons and Dragons, i.e. dwarves, elves, hobbits, I think it's halflings, isn't it, in D&D, etc., how do you think their cultural interactions would be? Like, take the races from D&D, stick them in today's world, how do you think their cultural interactions would be? And believe it or not, that's kind of that question is not going to have the answer you might expect. I was going to say not as interesting, but I think it's still as interesting. But race, I think, has actually very, very little to do with culture. And I mean actual race, not the social construct that we think of when we think of race, because, you know, blacks and Asians and whites and Hispanics, they're all one race. They're all human. Race is just a social construct. But actual races, elves, dwarves, hobbits, etc., I don't think would play too much into what their cultural interactions with each other are. It might have some effect, but not a big one. Culture is made and defined by history. And this is a very important thing to understand. A society's culture is almost 100% based upon not its physiology, but its history. So let me give you an example. In South America, I don't remember the tribe, because this is kind of just, I off the cuff, I didn't prepare for this or anything, but there is a tribe in South America that has a ritual that we would think is crazy, which is when a man comes of age, he has to put his hands in these gloves that are loaded with bullet ants. And bullet ants are named such because their sting is so powerful it feels like you've been shot. I believe some people say that the bullet ant venom makes you experience the worst pain a human could possibly experience. I don't know, I guess that's kind of subjective. But to be fair, it is excruciatingly painful, and it lasts for like 24 hours. It's really bad. It's not something you want to go through. It's a really, really devastating thing to get stung by even a bullet ant. And these people, for a trial of becoming a man, stick their hands in gloves that are full of them and get stung hundreds of times, and basically have to deal with it. Now, this is part of their culture. This is part of who they are, their society culture. And while we will probably never know exactly how it came to be, I'm willing to bet dollars to donuts I understand how the general how it came to be, which is, I would think, something along the lines of thus. An individual among their tribe at some point got stung by one bullet ant, maybe even several bullet ants, and it was an incredibly harsh and painful experience. And the tribe probably knew about this, that these were really painful and harsh, but at some point, an individual, an important member of the tribe, or a person who was going to become an important member of the tribe, was stung by one or several of these and endured its pain in a dignified way. Maybe they got stung, and while they were enduring this pain, they still hunted, they still succeeded, they still did something, they succeeded at something, which got them a lot of reputation. Oh my God, this guy was stung by these ants, and he still did this. That's a man. That's a warrior right there. If he can handle that, man, he can do anything. And he got a lot of reputation from it. And then someone else in the tribe, maybe at the same time, maybe a few years down the road, maybe even another generation down the road, someone wanted to show they were as good as this other person. So they went and purposely got themselves stung by bullet ants to show, yeah, well, you know, he is tough, but I'm tough too. I can do it. I can do it just as good as he did. And this became a thing. And in time, it became a ritual. And in time, that ritual became ingrained in their culture. So that culture, that ritual that is a part of that culture, it came about because of their history. That's kind of an extreme example, but it really, really does tend to, if you take a look at a macro scale, at a much larger scale, it still holds true. In fact, one really good tip I could offer to anyone who is looking to do any world building out there, like for example, when I made the world of Ardenfell, or more recently the world of the Corsairs, which technically I'm borrowing, it's set in the world of Rifts, so I'm borrowing a lot of stuff from Rifts, but it is still my own place setting, my own world, so to speak. But let's go with Ardenfell, because that was 100% my own. If you are looking to make a world for a book, for a story, for anything, here's what you do. After you decide what races you want to have and that kind of thing, decide two things. One, where they're located, where they are geographically, and two, what's their history. Decide those before you even come close to thinking about what kind of culture they have. What do they act like? What do they think like? Don't get into that yet. Get into their history and their geographical location. Their history more important, but geographical location has a little bit to play too. You're going to have a different culture if you were raised in the mountains than you will if you were raised in a desert. But history is what's really important, because that is what's really going to shape their culture. So, for example, we'll take Ardenfell, all right? You have the Wood Elves and the High Elves, and they hate each other. And then you have the Dwarves, which are pretty much like everyone except for the Orcs. And how did this come to be? How did I decide that? I didn't sit there and say, this is what I want, and then make history to go along with it. I said, okay, the Dwarves, they live in the mountains. The mountains are where they mine the gold. They're going to be the ones that come up with most of the gemstones and wealth of the countries of Ardenfell. And if they're the ones that have all the wealth, then they're going to be trading a lot. They're going to be traders. They're a history of traders. Well, what are defining traits that make good traders? What would you expect to find in a society that trades for a living? you would expect to find politeness. You would expect to find manners. You have some traders, of course, that are probably pushy and sneaky and try and cheat over you. But for a society to survive as traders, that's not going to work very often. You have to please your customers more often than not. So you're going to have manners. You're going to have a sense of neutrality. You're going to have a sense of we're friends with everyone because we want to trade with everyone. So that played a large part into dwarven culture. But they hate the orcs. Well, why do they hate the orcs? Well, because the orcs, at one point in their history, when the orcs made their empire, they swallowed up half of the dwarven empire. Now, it was a half of the dwarven empire that they weren't using. The dwarves were all based in the mountains, but they had that land. It was, quote unquote, theirs, even if they didn't use it. The orcs saw that they didn't use it, thought it was harmless to take it, but they took it from the dwarves, and the dwarves were very prideful. Why are the dwarves prideful? They're traders. Any trader, any merchant worth his salt has to be proud of his merchandise. If he's not proud of his merchandise, he can't transmit that feeling or sense of pride to the buyer. And if you have a society that is constantly proud of their merchandise, they're going to be proud in general. Over generations and centuries, they're going to become prideful. So you took their land. Were they using it? It doesn't matter. It was theirs, and you took it. And that's an insult to their pride, so they hate you. And that's how you get the relationship between the dwarves and the orcs. High elves and wood elves are the same. The elves were always kind of mistrusting of each other simply because they didn't know who were the original elves. The elves used to all be one elven race. And at some point in history, they split into the drow, the dark elves, the wood elves, and the high elves. And none of them know who was the original race, if any of them were the original race. So there was always that seed of, I'm better than you because I think I'm the original. But I don't know for sure, so I kind of I get overly defensive about it. That's part of their history. So they always had strained relationships. But then the high elves took over the wood elves and occupied them for, I think it was, 10 years? And they were rather harsh in their occupation. Why were they harsh? Well, because high elves aren't exactly warriors. They are used to fineries. They're used to luxuries. They're not used to war. So how do they want to avoid war? They make sure that their war doesn't have a chance of cropping up. They make sure that the wood elves don't have a chance of rebelling. So they're harsher than they should have been, based off of their own histories of we're not a warlike people, and if we give people too much freedom, they tend to not want to be under us anymore, thus causing wars. So you get that. So you get a culture that hates wood elves and a culture of wood elves that hates high elves based off of their own histories. So that was a rather long-winded explanation to point out that history is what defines culture, much more than races. And to illustrate this point, you could replace any of these races that I talked about and it would still work. You could make the orcs the miners of the mountain and the dwarves the new empire that took the land from the orcs, and you'd still get the same basic situation, just flipped. You could take the humans and put them in place of the wood elves, and they would still feel the same way towards the high elves that the wood elves feel. So it's the history that matters, not the race. I'm sure the race has a little bit to do with it, because if you are stout and hardy and can take a lot of punishment and abuse, you might be more warlike, and that warlike nature and tendencies is going to give you a more warlike history, and that warlike history is going to give you a different culture. So I do think race plays a part in it, but a much lesser role than the history itself. It plays a part in what kind of history you develop, which then in turn determines what your culture is. So yeah, that's that, and I missed my exit. Well, poop. I got so caught up in my explanation, I completely missed my exit. Good on me. Way to go, Squee. Nicely done. Just gonna have to pull a little U-turn here. Yep. Oh, so good times. Yeah. Excuse me. So that's that. I'm trying to remember what other questions were asked. A lot of people just wanted to talk about history. Were there any figures in history that motivated me? A lot, I suppose. Here's the problem with figures in history, is that all I know is what the textbooks teach me or what the historians teach me. And I don't know anything about the man or woman themselves. So it's hard for them to inspire me because, well, here's a great example. Abraham Lincoln. A lot of people say Abraham Lincoln inspires them because Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. And that's fantastic. And the act is fantastic, yes. But did Abraham Lincoln do it for inspirational reasons? I don't know, because if you look at the actual Emancipation Proclamation, there's an important caveat in there, which is any slaves in slave-owning states, any slaves in Confederate states are now freed. That's in the Emancipation Proclamation. And you're like, yeah, well, of course, but wait a second. Weren't there some states that had legal slavery that didn't join the Confederacy? That either stayed with the Union or remained neutral in all of it? Or pretty much stayed with the Union? What about their slaves? Because the way it's written, it kind of sounds like their slaves aren't free. Huh. Well, that kind of makes the whole thing look more like it was a political ploy to take strength away from the Confederacy more than it was a humanitarian responsibility. So, Now, did Abraham Lincoln do it out of a deep sense of humanitarianism? Possibly. Absolutely possibly. It's very possible that that wording was thrown in there by others, or maybe he really wanted to free all the slaves, but he knew in his political climate he could not afford to alienate the slave-owning states that were a part of the Union because he's in the middle of a war and he was conflicted, and this was a deep conflicting choice that he had to make. That's possible. It's also possible that he just didn't really care about the slaves and only cared about taking strength away from the Confederacy. I don't know, and I will never know. And that's why it's hard to say that any person in history motivated me. I could say their acts and deeds are motivational, absolutely. But here's a better question to answer. Is there anyone in history I'd want to talk to? If I could talk to one person, who would I want to talk to? I get asked that a lot. And my answer, unequivocally, would be Augustus. Or, Octavian. What was his name before he became Augustus? Something Octavian. Oh, I should remember this. Rome's kind of my thing. I'll remember by the time I post this, I'm sure. It's Octavian something, or something Octavian. But anyway, it's kind of important for what I was about to say. When he became emperor, he became Augustus. But before that, he was known as something else. And here's why I would want to meet him. I'd want to meet him in his later years, after he'd been Augustus for 20 some odd years and was not on his deathbed, but older. And here's why. When he was Otto Octavian, was it Otto Octavian? Is it Otto Octavian? Oh, this is going to drive me nuts. Anyway, when he was Octavian, he was merciless. He was brutal. He was unforgiving in a lot of his dealings when it came to consolidating power. When Rome was in a civil war after Julius Caesar died, and Mark Antony rose up, and Pompey rose up, and Octavius. Oh God, why can't I remember his freaking name? Anyway, while Augustus rose up, Augustus was really harsh and brutal in his dealings with his opponents and sympathizers of his opponents. He did some really brutal things that you look at that and you go, oh, dude, not cool, man. Not cool at all. when he became emperor, when he became Augustus Caesar, his entire life seemed to shift. His entire outlook seemed to shift. He became a great promoter of the arts and of culture and of infrastructure, and he became very merciful, and he built many great works that improved public health and public happiness, and he was very merciful to criminals, even criminals against him at the time of the war. It was like his entire outlook on life changed. And here's why I would want to meet him. I'd want to ask him what happened. I'd want to ask him what's the dealio. Did you actually have a revelation that turned your life around and you became much more of a humanitarian? Or was it something else? Were you clever and you realized, much like hang on. Oh, why can't I remember Roman names for the life of me? There was a guy who, very important, starts with an M. He reformed the whole legion. Marius! Thank you, me, for reminding me that it was Marius. Like Marius before him, who once said that, you got to be cruel to be kind. You have to be cruel first, and then be kind, because people will only remember the last things you do. They'll never remember the things that came first. And what he meant by that was, when you get into power, be cruel, be harsh, be devastating to defeat your opponents as quickly as possible, and to squash rebellion, and to make firm your seat of power. Make it so firm that no one can shake you from it. And then be kind, be generous, be merciful, because at the end of your life, that's all they'll ever remember. They won't remember that you were a tyrant. They'll remember all the great things you did afterwards. So that's how you go about doing this. And I want to know, Augustus, if that is your real name, which we know it's not, which were you? Were you the guy that was just very shrewd and knew that I'm going to be cruel now and then I'm going to be kind because that's all they'll ever remember me for, and were freaking right about it? Or did you have something happen to you? Did you settle down in your older years, Mr. Augustus? It's not your real name. Huh, Caesar? What happened? What's up? What's the dealio? I want to know. So I would really want to talk to him and just have a conversation with him. Hopefully a conversation where perhaps I'm ethereal, intangible, where he can't stick his guards upon me and have them kill me. Because that's one thing I fear. I was like, man, I want to go back in the past and do this. I would never want to go back in the past, ever, to any time. Because, well, I'd probably end up dead, because I know things. I know so many things compared to the average people back then, and I'd be tied to a bag of rocks and thrown into a river to see if God was on my side. I promise you I would probably drown. So, yeah, there's that. So that's my thoughts behind the wheel for today, because I'm almost home. And so by all means, leave comments, thoughts, questions. Ask questions so that I have future topics to talk about. And as always, I don't promise these every day. In fact, I can guarantee there probably won't be one tomorrow because it's my day off. But I do drive home a lot, so you might get these quite a bit. In any case, I will talk to you guys later. Ta-ta.